Hello, this is 𝗏𝗏𝗄 and you're watching The Shift, and this is where we cover everything around sustainability. Investors for Climate is focused on climate investment opportunities and attended by family offices, sovereign wealth funds, venture capitalists, angel investors, private wealth management advisors, ultra high net worth individuals, as well as public sector leaders actively investing into sustainability. And I guess this is also an opportunity to learn and network with peers with events held in Singapore and New York. Who started this? Well, I'm here with co-founder Christine Amour-Levar, who's also the founder of two NGOs, namely Her Planet and Women on a Mission, and she also sits on the board of Investables. I'm very interested to hear her latest venture. How are you, Christine?
I'm very well, Freda. Thank you so much for having me and interviewing me. It's always a pleasure to chat with you.
And it's always a pleasure hearing the things that you're up to. Before we get into what your current project, perhaps you can start with why you started your NGOs, Her Planet and Women on a Mission first, and what it aims to do. And I guess from that story, I've got another question, but do tell.
Sure, of course. Happy to do that, Freda. So I founded two NGOs registered in Singapore now almost 12 years ago. So the first one is Women on a Mission, and I know you know about my two NGOs. And honestly, the reason, the deep reason behind it was came from where I grew up. I grew up in the Philippines, as you know, and I witnessed very early on the great inequality that existed in my country. I was very lucky and very grateful that I grew up in a loving home and had many opportunities in my life. I got a good education, and that continued on in my career. But growing up in the Philippines, I really saw firsthand how vulnerable population were often impacted by economic crisis, by violence, by climate change, even because the Philippines is one of the most climate change prone countries in our region. And so I set up the first NGO, Women on a Mission, with two co-founders, as I said, almost 12 years ago, to support women impacted by violence and abuse. And then 5 years after that, so almost 7 years now, I've set up Her Planet Earth that supports women impacted by climate change. I'm the sole founder of that, but I have many partners with those initiatives. And both NGOs actually have a unique way of fundraising and raising awareness. We take all-female teams on expeditions around the world to remote places as far as Antarctica, Siberia, Iran, Ethiopia, etc., as a way to raise funds and awareness for our many charity partners. And it's been a wonderful journey doing that, and I've made some incredible friendships as well along the way.
Right, because I follow you and I'm looking at all the things you do. They're not luxury travel. They're like, the women really go through, it is extreme almost, right, to go through all these things. And I guess it's interesting, so you say growing with the Philippines in terms of climate change, and the story around women, and then now starting Investors for Climate. How did that all happen?
So I really believe that the things that I've been doing in my career, connect in many ways. There is a thread that connects them. It's firstly rooted in values and what my advocacy is around. So as you said, my life, the last 12 years, has really been a focus on empowering women, but also looking at climate change, conservation, but also supporting women impacted by climate change. And so the journey with sustainability for me started that way. I also have a consultancy business that I run in parallel. Because I do so much networking and meet so many people, I had many opportunities to work as a consultant. And so my first client was actually Temasek Trust, the philanthropic arm of Singapore Sovereign Wealth Fund, which I worked for almost 5 years, running comms and marketing across their 6 foundations. So I started working and kind of honing my skills, if you will, as a consultant in not just in communications marketing, but also in CSR and sustainability. And I got an opportunity during the pandemic to work with a big startup, a unicorn called 𝗓𝗔 Inc., when they were launching their cultivated meat into Singapore on December 2020, when Singapore government gave regulatory approval for the sale of cultivated meat. This was in the middle of the pandemic. There were real concerns about food security. We didn't have a vaccine yet, and they approached me to host a lot of their investor dinners to try this cultivated meat. And so over the 2 years of the pandemic, when I wasn't traveling or leading expeditions, I actually hosted in very small groups of 5. Remember, in Singapore, we were often in groups of 5 or groups of 2, groups of 8. In an immersive space, I hosted these climate investors, if you will, or investors focused on sustainability. And as a result, I realized that there was so much potential for influencing the movement of capital towards innovative solutions. So, food tech is only one area of potential potential climate investing. But I realized that philanthropy wasn't enough. I wanted to continue, of course, to support my many charity partners because I love what I do and I love taking women out of their comfort zone on expeditions because it's transformative, not just for the funds and the awareness we bring, but it also is transformative for the women that come with me. But I wanted to do more. And so as a result of my involvement as a consultant with this food tech company, I connected on many levels with different climate investors, with sovereign wealth funds, with ultra high net worth individuals, with family offices in Singapore, and some of them are also abroad. And so my little black book of contacts, if you will, in this space grew by leaps and bounds. And as a result, I got invited on boards as well. You mentioned Investable. I'm on the board of their fund out of Singapore, which is a global climate tech fund. And I also got involved with a group called Top-Tier Impact. Right. That basically regroups a massive group of sustainability-focused investors. And I actually hosted many investors in Davos, as well in Switzerland during the World Economic Forum. So this was kind of my foray, if you will, into sustainability and sustainable investing in particular. And that's how I met Helena, my partner for Investors for Climate.
Right. And I guess so interesting as well, right? You met your partner. She's, I guess, based out of New York, right? But what does your partner bring to the table and how do you capitalize on each other's strengths apart from location?
Of course. So Helena Wasserman, my partner for Investors for Climate, is a wonderful woman who I enjoy working with tremendously. And we had worked together when we were both involved with Top-Tier Impact, the company I just mentioned. So she was a business development director for them, and she actually pulled me in as an advisor with this group that is based out of Switzerland, that is a members club of climate investors, not specifically climate, but sustainability focused investors. And as I said, she asked me to come and host investors with her in Davos. And so we got to work together and we realized we really enjoyed working together. She's also part Swiss and half Italian. I'm part Swiss and Filipina and French. We work in French and English. We're always switching languages. Right. When we work, we have very similar values. And so as a result, we decided to set up our own initiative called Investors for Climate, really more honing in on climate investors. And she's now based in New York. She was based in Singapore before. And because obviously, New York is a big financial center. We said we'd start with hosting these unique networking closed-door events in Singapore and New York.
Right. So you talk about these closed-door events, right? And I guess closed-door, right? So you've got to be a select few and not so much public events. So are the conversations different because they're closed-door events? And what do they talk about?
Yes, absolutely. So from the onset, we really wanted to make our events very carefully curated, not just in terms of the content, the speakers that we invite, the workshops that we might run, or discussions and topics we discuss, but also the guest list. It's really quite exclusive, and we really wanted to bring people that we like personally, that we know in this space, that are really committed at the core, to make a difference and to use their power and influence and their money, quite frankly, to try to help scale up innovation solutions that will make a dent on emissions, CO2 emissions that are really the big focus now with global warming. So when we say we decided to make them closed door, it's by invitation only. We talk oftentimes when we plan our events about who we want in the room, make sure that we have a balance of family offices, ultra high net worth individuals, certain sovereign wealth funds, and make sure that we don't have too many people fundraising. We want people who are there to deploy capital. So we try to keep a balance of 80 to 20%, 80% of people with the means to deploy capital, and 20 who might be fundraising or might be innovative startups as well. So we want to showcase some key startups as well that we vetted and that we feel deserve to have access to this group of investors. So it's really exciting, actually. We love, organizing these events. We're looking at we use the Chatham House rules as well. So we make our guests aware that if anything is shared in confidence, especially if it's, it could be controversial information or just very private information, that, we are not to share that, obviously, to the public. And so as a result of the events being private and closed door, I feel that we managed to nurture a sense of family almost, and privacy, and people open up more and relax and enjoy themselves, and we want to make sure that the investors don't feel that there are too many people who are fundraising in the room too. So it's a balance that you have to maintain to make sure that the event is enjoyable and educational and inspiring too in many ways.
Right. I want to ask you this question, and I'm just wondering, how receptive are the investors, or do you already know that the people you invite are already receptive to this idea of investing for climate?
Yeah, so many of the people that we invite, we know are already investing in climate. So
Right.
we're not converting them. These are people who are interested in looking at potential deal flow, new companies out there, new ideas. They're looking at their portfolio in sustainability, and they might be looking for, to learn about maybe nature bonds. Maybe they only have, deep tech in their portfolio. So
Right.
this is an opportunity for us to showcase and discuss topics that could help investors look at different startups or companies that they might want to add to their portfolio. But generally, yes, they are open to it. And some family offices are actually more conservative in this space, we've noticed, but because they have generational wealth and they have family businesses that will potentially be impacted by climate change, they are also interested to look at their investments as a family office, and if the technology that they are looking for is connected in some way to the industry that their family has made their money in, then generally they tend to be open
Right.
to looking at different investment opportunities, even if it's a little bit more deep tech or a more nascent kind of technology.
Right. And so I was going to find out as well, are these investors expecting quick returns though? Or do they understand it's about the long game? Or am I having a misconception that it's the long game?
So actually, contrary to the myth, Freda, climate investment is not solely about sacrificing returns for sustainability. It can be very lucrative, and we're getting more and more data around this. And that's why, in a way, it's becoming very more mainstream, you see. More and more people are looking at investing in climate because there is a real lucrative element to it. And so it is generally, with family offices in particular, because, as I mentioned, they are managing generational wealth, they do tend to take a longer term view, but they're also mitigating the risks to their own family businesses and realize that they need to look at potential new technologies that could be game changer for their own family businesses, right? But in general, it is actually quite lucrative. It doesn't have to be such a long-term view in terms of investment, because there's so much urgency at the moment in terms of climate change, and governments are waking up, and many corporations are realizing that more needs to be done faster. There are actually many opportunities, if you can look at the next few years, to make a lot of money investing in climate.
Right.
So it's actually quite an exciting space as well.
Okay. And are they just now at the moment held in Singapore and New York? Are you planning to go elsewhere, come to Malaysia?
So we are. And actually, we'll be announcing more of this. So we're looking at having pods, if you will, in 5 cities.
Okay.
And they will be the big financial centers for sure. So we're in discussions with some individuals who could be part of the team in some of those financial centers that could, through their network, host similar events. Obviously, keeping the branding and the style of our culture and also the style of our events, of course, very close to the heart. But definitely looking at expanding, because more and more, this is becoming the norm, I believe. And hopefully in the future, it won't even be called climate investing. It will just be investing in a responsible way.
Right, investing in a responsible way, exactly, right? And even when you look at the kinds of things that are posed to them or opportunities, are they, and of course, climate is also, there's so many areas to look at. Are there particular kinds of climate investment opportunities that investors seem to be more keen on?
What I've noticed is definitely there are certain types. So certain types of climate investment opportunities tend to attract a bit more attention. So renewable energy, for example, sustainable agriculture is one, green technologies in general. But for example, in Singapore, we've become, over the last few years, a food tech center, because there is a big focus on food security. So a lot of the food tech companies and alternative protein, plant-based, or even cellular agriculture, what we call cellular agriculture, or cell-based meats and seafood, are in Singapore, because the government has been so open to welcoming them here, and investment opportunities are also here. I've also noticed a big interest in biodiversity and nature bonds. So actually, one of the workshops that we ran in our last event had the acting CEO of the Nature Conservancy out of Singapore talking about nature bonds and the opportunities for investment there. And I particularly like one, which is solar AI technology. This is one of the ones I'm interested in. And us actually at Investable, we invested in a Singapore startup called Solar AI Technologies. They've actually changed their name recently to Get Solar. And this is a solar technology that uses AI, obviously, that is deploying in developing countries, including the Philippines, with zero startup costs. So there's a lot of exciting technologies out there. And that's what I enjoy the most, to be honest, about being involved in this space, is learning from the entrepreneurs that are coming up with incredible solutions.
Right. And I guess when you meet these people, they're kind of sophisticated investors already, and probably investing, right? Are they, and maybe not the sophisticated one, but are there some misconceptions people have around this space when you have these conversations with them?
In terms of what do you mean? In terms of what kind of misconceptions?
In terms of investing, or the kind of technology available, certain perceptions.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's a good question because as I said, because there's so much new technology coming out in this space, and cutting edge technology in particular. I mentioned cellular agriculture, but even at our last event, we showcased 3 amazing startups that are changing the face of green hydrogen, for example. So, if people are not familiar with green hydrogen, that's something that, it's not always easy to grasp. If you're not knowledgeable about this kind of technology, you probably need to do a deep dive before considering an investment. We had another startup called 𝗔𝗵𝘃𝗏𝗏 that actually produces seaweed that they put in the livestock's food,
right?
Like cows, feed, etc. That reduces methane emissions by almost 90%. So these are really interesting solutions. And we also had a startup called 𝗦𝗘𝗔𝗦𝗢𝗡 that uses seaweed membranes to hold water, so that you would remove the need for plastic bottles, etc. Right. So there are amazing technologies. And generally, what I've noticed with investors is that if they are investing their money in a particular sector, they will usually become expert in this area. They will read everything they can. They will interview people. They'll talk to scientists. So a lot of times when big investors are looking at a fund like Investable, for example, they will look at a fund and they will ask what kind of connections we have with PhDs as well. If we're really investing, if we're proposing climate tech investment opportunities, we also need to have access to scientists in our advisory board, people who really understand different technologies, because they are such new technologies. So it's an area that, as an investor, you have to educate yourself, and that's why I think our events are so good, because we bring in experts and we bring an opportunity for them to share their businesses, their technology, but we also conduct round table discussion in smaller groups so that they can do a deep dive and ask those questions that investors want to know, in terms of how does this technology really work, what's the long-term plan for it, etc. So they can start deciding if they want to put some of their investments in this space as well, because you have to do due diligence and then really actually go deep into understanding what you're investing in. It's a responsibility for many family offices. They have the responsibility to keep that wealth and grow that wealth as well when they invest in technologies like that.
Right, especially family businesses, they're thinking of generations to come.
Of course.
Final question, Christine. I know 2024, you've got plans to have more events around the region. What else is in store for 2024?
So there's a lot in store. I've got 2 expeditions coming up for Her Planet Earth on one of my NGOs. So taking 2 teams of women, one to Ladakh to support the Snow Leopard Conservancy up there. We'll be going up to 4,000 meters in February, so very cold, minus 20 degrees. And the funds that will go with this expedition will support employing more women to work in Snow Leopard Conservancy, because it's always about trying to help build women's livelihood in this space. And then the next expedition will be in the Gobi Desert of Mongolia. And this is to support the Nature Conservancy and their work with women in Mongolia, indigenous women in Mongolia. So we'll be crossing the Gobi Desert on the back of back-trend camels. These are the camels with long 𝗪. With Investors for Climate, we'll definitely be hosting a couple of events, probably one in Singapore in the next few months. And I'm already cooking up some really interesting concepts and talking to potential sponsors. And then in New York, we're looking at doing an event for Climate Week in New York as well. So Helena's working on that as well. And I'm also looking to launch a community of women in Singapore called Terra Goddesses that bring together a lot of my community in sustainability, but also in female empowerment in general, with an NFT-based membership, which will unlock a lot of privileges and invitations to some of these events as well. So it's really all about community for me. And I think that's at the core of a lot of the things I do.
Right, well, exciting 2024. Thanks for spending time again, and really lovely to see you again. I've been speaking to Christina Amour-Levar talking about Investors for Climate, and you're watching The Shift.